What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today we start a new series here on the channel calling it Fix the Franchise. Last year I called it Offseason Checklist. I like the sound of Fix the Franchise a little better. Basically, this is my offseason preview for each and every team. I try to cover all 32 NFL teams to the best of my ability. So today we start with the team with the #1 overall pick and a very fascinating team to talk about when it comes to this offseason, the Chicago Bears. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this series through its full fruition and full run, but hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video about the Chicago Bears. And before I start talking about Chicago, I gotta ask, and this is what I need you to comment down below. If you're the GM Ryan Poles, are you trading Justin Fields and keep the #1 pick? Or are you going the route I think I would go, keep Justin Fields, trade the #1 pick, move back, and continue to work the 2023 draft board? Let me know what you would do. Keep Fields, trade #1, or keep #1 and trade Fields. I think that's gonna be a fascinating situation. And if you happen to live in Chicago, I'd love to know what the pulse of the city, where the city stands on that. But anyways, let's talk about the Chicago Bears. Obviously coming off a 3-14 season. They have the #1 overall pick for a reason. So yeah, and also got the fortunate Week 18 win from Houston. That definitely plays a factor in it. They have 8 picks in total. They don't have their own second-round pick. That belongs to Pittsburgh. That was the Chase Claypool trade. So Pittsburgh basically has another first-round pick because with the Dolphins forfeiting their first-rounder, that pick is number 32 overall, so that's pretty nice. Doesn't come with a 5th-year option, though, which, depending on the position, that could come in handy. But they do have a second-rounder that comes from the Baltimore Ravens because of the Roquan Smith deal. So for the most part, their draft class is pretty standard. I think they have 2 forwards. That's where the extra pick comes from. But you have an extra day 3 pick, and the rest of it pretty normal, just not their second rounder. And then look at the cap space. 116, I forgot the dollar sign there, so pardon my poor grammar, but almost $116 million in cap space. And I had to put the note in there. Atlanta's second with 56, so they're more than double the next closest team when it comes to available cap space. And that makes this team really interesting. And I mean, one, credit to Ryan Poles. I mean, this is why you trade Roquan Smith. This is why you trade Robert Quinn. This is why you trade a Khalil Mack. This is why you let an Akeem Hicks walk, right? This is the type of moves that you make. And even the Chase Claypool trade, the draft value, you wish you could have, given the Ravens second rounder to Pittsburgh instead of your own. But, the cost of, potentially getting an upgrade there at the receiver position when you desperately need one. And I liked that move from the sense that Ryan Poles is not targeting this 30-year-old veteran that he thinks can, all of a sudden have this team in win now mode. No, it's a young player with upside, still something to tap into. And realistically, that's basically my MO here for free agency. This team does not have a whole lot of bad contracts, as you can tell by the fact they have $116 million in cap space. The one that stood out to me was Justin Jones. You can cut him and save roughly $5 million. So to me, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a move that I think I would make. But beyond that, there's really not a whole lot that could possibly stick out. So then you start thinking about spending. And what I don't want the Bears to do is do what the Jets did, 7 years ago now, when they signed Le'Veon Bell and CJ Mosley. The Jets had the most cap space in the NFL, and they were like, we're going to go spend it. And then, they signed a Le'Veon Bell despite their offensive line not being good. And they signed a CJ Mosley despite running a different defense and having nothing else around him that was similar to what Mosley had in Baltimore. And what do you know? Both those signings completely did not work out. Bell was gone in 2 years' time, and Mosley's still there, but he has not reclaimed the heights that he had in Baltimore. So Chicago, spend, but please spend wisely. Some of the places I do think they can get an upgrade, and some of this will correlate to where they're moving. If they trade the #1 pick, are they moving back to 4? Are they going to get a Jalen Carter or Will Anderson pretty much guaranteed? Are they moving back to 9 like I did in my last mock draft, trading with Carolina? Does Atlanta, does Las Vegas make that move? Are they just swapping with Houston at 2? So a lot of things to be figured out there. But nonetheless, if they do move back to 4, I do feel like the Colts, them and Carolina are the most likely situations. I did Carolina because I think that's the most likely. But either way, let's say they do end up a situation where they're looking at Carter or Will Anderson. I don't think these free agency moves take away from potentially drafting those. So I just wanted to clear the air on that just real quick before we dive into it. I think the attack defensive line, partially because this edge free agency group is not good. And they could bring in a Unique Ngakoue or something like that, who's a pass rush specialist, sure. But I just don't really see the exponential value added there. So I'd attack the defensive line, and kind of like the Chase Claypool trade, I want guys who are 28 years old and younger. So that was kind of the consistent trend here for the names I tossed out. But Daron Payne, I think he's the one interior defensive lineman that could catch a big bag. Zach Allen could, but his emergence was kind of late a season ago and then all throughout the 2022-23 season. So he's got a year and a half of starting to really come into his own. Daron Payne, And he's done it in kind of different ways. His first 2 years in Washington, he was a really good pass rusher and kind of lackluster in the run game. Then his last 2 years, kind of flipped on its head and served as a really nice complement next to Jonathan Allen, who is a really good pass rusher. And Payne became the two gap, the nose tackle there to stop the run. And then you started to see less pass rush upside. But he's a guy who's done both. But I think from Chicago's perspective, this team was putrid against the run. And, part of that's also, of course, moving on from Roquan Smith, not having Akeem Hicks there. But, if you sign Daron Payne to a reasonable contract, he's young, he's in his mid-20s. Could be that, I think ideally that two-gap nose tackle there in the middle of the defense. But there comes some pass rush upside there. Or if you just want a three-tack, it's a position that Matt Eberflus covets in his defense. That's why the Colts made the DeForest Buckner trade when he was the defensive coordinator there in Indy. Zach Allen could be a really interesting player to add in there, kind of up and coming. I liked him a lot coming out of Boston College, a day 2 pick, but then didn't make a whole lot of noise the first 2 years. And I'll admit, as much as I do like him, I kind of gave up. I was like, okay, day 2 pick that hasn't made anything happen the first 2 years. It's probably just not going to happen. But, like I said, second half of his third year and then this year in Arizona, really good player. And maybe he could fill that 3-tech spot. Now, again, going back to the draft conversation, what happens if you draft, Jalen Carter? Because, Will Anderson's taken at 3 by Arizona. Let's say something like that happens. Well, on a 3-4 base defense, you have your 3-4 DN and your 3-4 D tackle. That's not the nose, but those guys both play that 4-eye tech position, however you want to line them up in front of a tackle. But they basically play that same spot. So even if you sign a Zach Allen and you ended up drafting Jalen Carter, I would just give you a round of applause. That interior pass rush is going to be bananas for teams. And keep in mind, offensive guards are typically worse pass protectors than offensive tackles. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing to have if you're a Chicago fan. Or you get Will Anderson and you have a Zach Allen or something like that on the inside, and that's really fun. But also, let's stick with this example. You get Zach Allen and Jalen Carter from free agency in the draft, respectively. When you go into nickel or dime, you get this 4-man pass rush. Those two guys lining up right next to each other, pass rushing from the middle. Again, good luck opposing quarterbacks. That actually sounds like a really fun tandem. So, again, I think you can operate through free agency despite what might potentially come to you in the NFL draft and where they might end up moving. I think a good example is actually the Ravens of last year. They did a really good job in free agency, even if it was just signing, a Justin Houston to a 1-year deal to play that edge spot. They went into the NFL draft with no glaring holes in their roster and have a sober view at the boards. That's why they drafted Kyle Hamilton. That's why they drafted Tyler Linderbaum after they traded Hollywood Brown. And I hope Chicago does the same thing, especially when you're picking at 1, which if you're picking 1, you're taking Bryce Young. But if that pick becomes 4 with a trade with Indianapolis, 7 with the trade from Las Vegas, 8 with Atlanta, 9 with Carolina, whatever it ends up being, if you have all these holes pretty much patched up and you have a clean look at the board, whatever comes your way, you can fairly assess that's the best player available. Let's take that. Let's go that route. Let's take that player. So that's what I'm hoping. Anyways, tangent aside, obviously, pass rush and wide receiver were the first things that kind of stuck out to me as needs for Chicago. So we talked about Daron Payne, Zach Allen. You can go to spottrack.com, see some of the other interior defensive linemen that could be available. If you have someone else you want to throw out you think would be a good fit, I'd love to hear it down below. And then for receivers, I'm really looking for a possession guy because Darnell Mooney's this guy who can play inside out, very, very speed oriented when it comes to the strengths of his game. Can make it happen down the field, but also can be a bit of a satellite player. Velus Jones had that Week 18 touchdown. I think really the only thing I like about Velus Jones is the fact that he is a good satellite yards after the catch weapon. So let's make him the bubble screen gadget guy. Let's let Darnell Mooney be a satellite, but also a deep threat. And then you get Chase Claypool, who as a Steelers fan, I always wanted to see him work a little bit more underneath in intermediate parts of the field. DK Metcalf in Seattle obviously has that go route, and he's so hard to stop that working vertically. But the comeback and then also the slant off of that are really potent, and he gets open at a high clip because of that, because DBs have to respect his long speed. I've always hoped and wished that Chase Claypool would add something like that, but he unfortunately hasn't. So let's just say for the time being, he's your physical, go into the catch point, take advantage of a small corner type of a guy. So I'm looking for somebody who can work that 5 to 15-yard range between the hashes, and to me, Jacoby Myers could be that guy. Chase Claypool plays on the outside. He can do some end-around stuff. Darnell Mooney can play inside and out, but let's say in this situation he plays on the outside. Jacoby Myers, big slot. That's what he did for New England. Mid-20s. Bring him into Chicago. All of a sudden, I look at that wide receiver room. You got speed. You got a couple different, gadget players. Claypool, Velus Jones. Mooney can do some of that as well, of course. You got size with Claypool. You got size with Myers. You got a guy who can work over the middle of the field. You got some inside-out versatility with Mooney. Speed, size. You kind of got it all. You kind of got it all. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, maybe there's something for Justin Fields to build upon, and we can get a clean look at what he is as a passer. Offensive line could certainly be in the mix here, too, specifically interior, but That could also be a day 2 point of emphasis. And also, I didn't see a whole lot of names that immediately stuck out as, mid-20s. These are interior offensive linemen that you got to go grab. So maybe they go veteran route, add a guard, add a center, something like that. Braxton Jones was a lot better than I anticipated. And Larry Borum held his own at right tackle. If they don't bring back Riley Reef, I think Borum can stick and hold his own at right tackle. So I actually think, despite how skeptical I was last year, they got bookend tackles. They're okay at that spot. Maybe patching up that interior, though, is the way to move forward. But I like them grabbing these, mid-20s. Ideally, you can get them at a reasonable price. At Jacoby Myers, Zach Allen, Ron Payne. These are the type of guys I'm looking at. Let me talk about the NFL draft. Again, I'm of the mindset you trade the number 1 overall pick. I just think you can get more for that pick than you can for Justin Fields. Fields maybe catches you first. If that number 1 pick, you could even move down to 4 and potentially get 2 1s, 2 2s from Indianapolis. I mean, it depends on how hot of a commodity that number 1 pick grows into, which I anticipate it becoming the biggest commodity of the NFL draft. Again, the Bears control the offseason. They have the number 1 pick and they have the most cap space. They control the next, 5 months of the NFL season. And then, the second bullet point, normally I have 3 here. This is best player approach draft without a doubt. So let's say they move back to 4. Whoever they have the higher grade on, Carter, Anderson, don't think about, even though I've been saying, Matt Eberflus wants that 3 tech, but you don't have to be pigeonholed into that. Look at it solely from the focus of who's the best player. And then once you get in the second round, is it an interior offensive lineman? Is it a linebacker? Is it a corner? Whatever it is, don't think about it from a position perspective. Who's the best player who I think can help us get into our winning window, and in 2 years' time when we're in the playoff mix, in the hunt, whatever, that guy gives us the best chance of being able to make it. So there are needs across the entire roster. There's really not a spot on this roster other than quarterback, if you believe in Fields like I do, that you look at and you're like, yeah, they're okay. They don't need an upgrade there, excuse me. Offensive tackle, again, I've been impressed with those guys, but still, if a great fit fell into your lap, you'd be hard-pressed not to consider it, right? So this team has so many different holes. Don't, pigeonhole yourself into thinking about needs. Best player available. That's the way to look at this, and I think Ryan Poles will do that. Ideally, though, pass rush, wide receiver, I think those are the areas where I do think you can get better. Linebacker as well. Obviously, moving on from Roquan Smith left a huge hole there, so we'd like to see them get better there. Corner, I think another area, but again, now at this point, I'm basically listing off every position group that's not quarterback. So again, I just hope this team goes best player available instead of reaching down the board. And then final notes, the potential's there. This team, again, controls the offseason. Most cap space by more than double the next closest in Atlanta, the number 1 overall pick, and I really do think they're going to trade that pick and get a massive haul, even if it is just sliding down to 4. I think they're going to get a bunch for it. Even if they're swapping with Houston at 2, I think they're going to get a bag for that too. Just because you have Houston, you have Carolina, you have the Raiders, you have Atlanta maybe in the mix, you have Washington maybe in the mix, the Jets maybe. I think they're probably a veteran quarterback team. But anyways, you get my point. And because of that, they have all the power of the NFL world at the fingertips. I just hope they look at it with a sober view and say, hey, we have all this money to spend. But it doesn't mean we spend it all. It doesn't mean we just throw it out to players that have played in the NFL. We need to make sure this is the right fit for our team and this contract makes sense for us long term. Because we may have money now, but we may not in a couple of years, right? Look at the Jags. They're going to be over the cap next season. This is a team that 2 years ago felt like they had an abundance of money to spend, too much money to spend, really. And then same thing with the draft. You may get excited about potential fits and, okay, we need an edge, so maybe this guy. No. Best player available. Think about it with a vertical board. You have 1 through 100. That's the list in which you make these decisions, not a horizontal board where you're looking at draft needs and trying to find a potential guard or a potential linebacker, corner, tackle, whatever. So already kind of hit on that a lot, so those are my final notes for a reason. But let me know what you think the Chicago Bears should do this offseason. Specifically, if you are in that GM spot, are you trading number 1 and keeping Fields, or are you trading Fields and keep a number 1 overall pick to take Bryce Young? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hopefully you guys are excited for this series, and if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe as well. Plenty more football content coming your way, and plenty more draft coverage in specific coming your way on this channel. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.